The Baltimore Ravens win their Week 7 matchup with the Cleveland Browns. We recap the game and more next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes over on YouTube in video format. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less in their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. And we are back here after the Ravens do win. They win in Week 7. They beat the Cleveland Browns 23-20. The final score. This was an important win. It was massively important. I think if the Ravens lost this game, it would have been pandemonium, and they almost gave it away again. But we are here talking about a win. It's Victory Monday, and we got to take a little solace in that. It's always better talking after a win as opposed to a loss. Baltimore moves to 4-3 on the season. They still lead the AFC North through the virtue of that tiebreaker over Cincinnati. We'll dive into this whole game here. We'll talk about the offense, talk about the defense, talk about what's next, the whole 9 yards. So a ton to talk about, especially in a game that really, when it came down to the end, could have gone either way. So there are a lot of points, questions, etc. to answer here. We'll talk about them. But if you are here on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video. If you're here in audio form, be sure to follow along with us too. Subscribing, following. It is free. We put out daily Ravens content 5 days per week. It's the same show in both audio and video form. So if you haven't already subscribed or follow, please consider doing so. You know, it is free, and it's a win for you. It's a win for me. But we're here talking about the Ravens win today, so we'll dive into that. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at ChaosStriker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So let's start out with the offense here in this game, 23-20. Offense, I always start with Lamar Jackson. That's not going to change here. But in terms of passing, not really a ton to report on. Lamar Jackson finished this game with just 9 completions. He had 9 completions out of his 16 attempts, 120 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He did run 10 times for 59 yards. That's kind of bleeding into the rush offense a little bit, which we'll talk about. But, you know, the pass offense was largely ineffective this game. Lamar Jackson did have a couple of really nice throws. The one to Devin Duvernay where the ball just floated down the sideline into the arms of Devin Duvernay. That was a phenomenal throw, but we just didn't see a ton. We didn't see a ton. And it wasn't necessarily that Lamar Jackson was bad or horrendous in this game. And I'm not going to pin all the blame on the pass offense on Lamar Jackson. I'm not going to do that. We did see Rashad Bateman drop a pass. We saw receivers not getting open. Some plays the offensive line didn't block well enough. This is a group effort, but I will say with Lamar Jackson, it does feel like he's holding the ball a bit too long, at least personally for my liking. It feels like he does have 1 or 2 things open, just short stuff that he can take, that he can check down. If stuff isn't open, if stuff isn't developing down the field, which obviously you would like, I feel like that is a throw that Lamar Jackson can make. And even if you're not picking up 20 yards or 40 yards, we know the Ravens have pushed the ball down the field this year. We know they want to get those 20-plus plays, those 40-plus plays, but that's not going to happen on every single play. And look, it'd be great if they could just go 80-yard touchdown, 80-yard touchdown, 80-yard touchdown the whole time, but that's unrealistic, right? So there was one, I can't remember the exact screenshot. I'm going to try to play it out here and kind of picture it here for everybody. Lamar Jackson was holding the ball. There was Gus Edwards kind of running across the middle of the field. And Lamar Jackson, he's picking, is holding the ball and not really looking in that direction. I think it was. Again, I can't remember completely, but it's that type of thing where we saw Lamar Jackson threw a screen to Patrick Ricard, right? That was obviously a design thing, but it's those types of plays, those successful screen passes. We saw it in week 1 against the Jets. The short stuff can really, really help, even if it's only picking up 2 or 3 yards, right? It's a 2nd and 7 is better than a 2nd and 10 or an ill-advised throw or whatnot. So I think Lamar Jackson is holding on to the ball in certain situations for a bit too long. And I think as the year goes on, that trend will start to go away, and we will start to see him take the short stuff more often. But he is, and he's a player that he can dance around in the pocket. He can make so much happen with both his arm and his legs. But that is one thing I at least have noticed about Lamar Jackson in some situations, not all situations, but in some situations this year. But he did contribute. I'm not going to say he was a non-factor in this game because he had good throws and good runs, but it just based off the expectations that I think a lot of people had for him coming out of those first 3 weeks, these last 4 have just been kind of like, what are we doing here? So I think that's where I am with Jackson. Like, obviously, he is such a talented playmaker. He is such a talented quarterback, but we have not seen everything that we can see from him over these last 4 weeks. So 9 passes completed out of 16 pass attempts for him in this game. Not a game where the pass offense got a lot going, but it was the run offense that carried this offense to their points, and I guess at the end of the day, to victory. And it wasn't necessarily on just the legs of Lamar Jackson this time around. We saw the pass offense kind of carry that rushing offense over the first 3 weeks. Well, the rush offense has been carrying this pass offense, and what a shout out I want to give right here to Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards is someone who hadn't played a professional football game competitively in 646 days. The last competitive football game he played was that Buffalo loss in 2021 in the divisional round. He comes in, he looks great. And the Ravens have been giving those guys, the guys who are coming back from injury, the pitch counts, right? Like J.K. Dobbins and Ronnie Stanley and Marcus Peters, and they're kind of waning them off of those. With Gus Edwards, the Ravens said, hey, here's 16 carries. Here's a workload for you. You're gonna take it, and you're gonna do what you do with it. And he did it. He did the thing. 16 carries, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. It felt so great seeing him getting back in the end zone. Gus Edwards was such a bright spot on the day for the Ravens. He looked like he was back. The Ravens have been missing Gus Edwards. They have been missing a player like Gus Edwards. This is a player who averaged over 5 yards a carry in each of his first 3 seasons. And in this game, picking up right where he left off, Baltimore had multiple 3rd and short, 4th and short situations. They converted on those at a high clip. And part of the reason why was because Gus Edwards was there, that bruising back who always falls forward. I can't remember the negative yard stat. I know I've said it on the show before, but Gus Edwards has very minimal negative yard attempts over the course of his career, or back to the line attempts where he's gaining 0 or negative yards. He is a player that falls forward. He can pick up a yard for you. So on a 3rd and 1, where the Ravens maybe would have gotten stuffed on a Kenyon Drake carry or a Mike Davis carry or whatnot, Gus Edwards falls forward for 2-3 yards. You pick up those first downs, 4th and 1s at the goal line. You can score in those situations. 3rd and 1s on the goal line. You can score in those situations a lot easier with Gus Edwards there. So I think he was absolutely paramount to this victory. Big shout out to Gus Edwards. Other rushing stats, Lamar Jackson, 10 for 59. Justice Hill, 5 for 26. Did have that fumble. Kenyon Drake, 11 for 5. So 0.5 yards per carry for Kenyon Drake. Not great. Mark Andrews, 1 for 4. Patrick Ricard, 1 for nothing. And I think with the run game, like the Ravens were averaging, I think it was 4.7 yards per carry at the half. And they come out in the start of the 3rd quarter and they get the ball back because they deferred in the first half. And they end up passing the ball 3 straight times. It was 4.6 yards per carry. But they end up passing the ball 3 straight times and gets themselves into a 4th and 29 situation. Now, the first down play was a sack. So that kind of puts you behind the 8 ball anyway. And if you're coming out throwing the football on first down to start the second half, fine. Like, I understand. But then you're kind of saying, well, what do you want the Ravens to do? You want them to run in a 2nd and almost 20 situation? Kind of. Like a little bit. I mean, I think if you run a draw play or an RPO, like I think you pick up a decent chunk. And yes, obviously throwing the football can get you more yards and is obviously, I think, a not better call, but I think it'd be the more popular call in a 2nd and super long situation. But I think a run with the way the Ravens were running the ball could have gotten them into a 3rd and 10 from that sack they took on first down. So those are the types of plays and situational awareness. And I know we saw it throughout the game with Greg Roman, where some plays, the situational awareness was not there. And then you saw other plays where he opened up that vault. The 4th down play with Mark Andrews under center, the pitch play to Lamar Jackson. That was a really fun, creative play, and it worked. It really did. And Lamar Jackson stiff-armed, I believe it was Deion Jones, into the the shadow round. He stiff-armed Deion Jones with a force. He was forceful on that stiff arm. But I do think that the Greg Roman situation, I'm someone who has remained very neutral on it. I have said that, look, I think Greg Roman is a good offensive coordinator, but he does have very glaring flaws. I think if Baltimore lost this game, and look, this is just my personal opinion, this purely speculation, is I think the Ravens probably would have fired someone if they had lost this game against Cleveland. And as I've said, you kind of deduct things from each other. You say, all right, well, this person's out, that person's out. It probably falls to Greg Roman. So I think that he did enough. The Ravens didn't lose, so I think he's safe for now. But like at some point, if the offense continues to kind of go through these really up and down stretches, the defense has played very well. We'll talk about them in the second segment. But the offense is almost like, for on Facebook or something, when you have the option to put like feeling, and then you can put whatever you're feeling, like feeling happy, feeling sad, feeling this. I'm putting the feeling confused on the offense right now. I really don't know what to think. I think the rushing offense with Gus Edwards is going to take off. I do, but just can the receivers gain separation? Can Lamar Jackson get back to playing full Lamar Jackson football where we don't just see the flashes, we see that MVP play we saw in the first 3 weeks. So interesting conversations to talk about here throughout the week as the Ravens gear up for Tampa Bay. But coming up in our second segment, we will be diving into the defense, talking about how they contributed to this victory. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about. But first, this episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Prediction Strike, the world's first sports stock market. You can now invest in professional athletes just like stocks. It's a lower risk alternative to sports betting, and athlete prices move based on performance and supply as well as demand. So if you invested in, let's say, Jalen Hurts 1 year ago, you'd be up 48.2%. You have guys like Rashad Penny, who was up before his injury. Kyle Pitts was down before his resurgence and his struggle to the start of the year. You have tons of options to look at. And all athletes benefit too and are entitled to a percentage of their market cap, unlike sports betting companies. You also have 2.5% trade fees. That's the lowest in real money sports. You can invest in 4 sports, not just the NFL, but also UFC, NBA, and MLB. So download the Prediction Strike app and use code LOCKED for a free share when you sign up and make a first deposit of $20 or more. That's promo code LOCKED for a special one-time giveaway. Prediction Strike will choose one person who signs up with code LOCKED and make a deposit of 100 free random shares. That could be worth up to $3,000 if you get lucky and receive, let's say, Josh Allen shares. Invest in what you know on Prediction Strike, the stock market for sports. And I do want to tell you a bit about BlueNile. Whether you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone to celebrate, or want to let your love sparkle, BlueNile can help you make your celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, BlueNile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. BlueNile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. BlueNile's bench jewelers will then help you handcraft a perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring. And if you're looking for a piece of fine jewelry to commemorate a special milestone but still having trouble choosing, BlueNile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're available via phone or chat to help you find memorable gifts at every budget. So make your moment sparkle with BlueNile. Go to BlueNile.com. Use code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BlueNile.com. BlueNile.com. Code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com. Code LOCKEDON. We're back here. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here, talking about the Ravens' 23-20 win over the Cleveland Browns. Big division win. Baltimore Ravens 2-0 in their division. They have now won more divisional games than they won all of last year when they went 1-5 in their division. So that is a start. 2-0 versus 1-5. Give me the 2-0. I'll take that. So we'll dive into this now. Defensively for the Ravens. And I think when you're talking about what the Ravens did defensively on Jacoby Brissett, he finished 22 of 27, 258 yards. So ultimately, he had a very high completion percentage in this game. But you have Nick Chubb, who had 16 carries for 91 yards, 5.7 yards per carry. He had a score in this game. The Browns averaged 4.7 yards per carry as a team. I thought Baltimore, well, look, the first drive was just nightmare, out of a horror movie for the Ravens. That first drive, it was almost thinking, are they going to lose this way? Are they going to lose in a blowout? Because the defense got gashed by Nick Chubb. There were missed tackles, long plays. It was just everything wrapped up into one. but I do think they settled down in the middle of the game. And then the end of the game, they kind of got burned again. The Ravens, I will say this, and we'll kind of dig back into offensive stats a little bit in the final segment, but the Ravens had 5 sacks in this game on Jacoby Brissett. I want to give big shout outs. Calais Campbell, I thought, had a great game. Patrick Queen played phenomenal football. Justin Houston made his impact felt. You had guys contributing all over the defense for the Ravens, especially in that front seven. I thought the front seven played really, really well. Even guys like Jason Pierre-Paul getting his hand on a pass. You have players that I think contributed really, really in big ways to this win. And Queen in particular had back-to-back stuffs, just absolute stuffs, deep into Browns territory. When the Browns were looking to get something going, he flew into the offensive backfield and was able to tackle the ball carrier for a loss. And that is the type of player, that's the type of confidence that I think we have seen from Patrick Queen before. And when he plays with that confidence, he is so good at what he does. Now, there have been plenty of ups and plenty of downs with Patrick Queen, but he played a great football game on Sunday, and that's something I will stand by. He played great, and he's starting to get that. He talked about it. He's starting to get that confidence, kind of building upon it, and I think that is the best version of Patrick Queen 100%. I think Baltimore missed Justin Houston really badly. He has multiple big plays in this game. He has 2 sacks, and there were Justin Houston missed a sack late in the game, so he could have had 3. He missed a sack on Jacoby Brissett, and the Ravens missed a couple of those sacks late where Brissett kind of escaped and made something out of nothing, and we have seen that plenty in Baltimore. It is not new to see that, but it's that's one of the areas I think they do need to improve upon. It is the missed tackling. There were a bunch of missed tackles in this game, and it's kind of been an underlying theme for me throughout the course of the season, where before this one, we had seen the Ravens miss a tackle here, miss a tackle there. The opposing team would get an extra 4, 5, 6, 7 yards, and that would be what it was. But for the Ravens in this game, it was a little more egregious than that. I think we saw multiple plays like that in particular. Also, the Ravens did have a couple of penalties. You could go offensively. James Prochet had a personal foul penalty, which pretty much wiped out that Patrick Ricard screen I talked about in the first segment. And then you have, a couple holding pass interference plays on the defense. There was one where, Geno Stone just ran into Donovan Peoples-Jones and gave the Browns a first down, but it wasn't the 10 penalties for 74-yard performance the Ravens had. They only had 3 penalties for 53 yards, and I just named all of them. So it's much better, but it was just the penalties in the spots they were in felt very, very big. Now, the Browns had 6 penalties for 45 yards, and boy, I mean, we'll get into it in the third segment, that kind of end to the game that happened for the Ravens. Well, I guess it kind of pertains to special teams, so we'll talk about it at the end of the second segment, actually. But yeah, Baltimore's defense, I think, it's been a unit that carried the offense a little bit. I think that was the case here too, holding the Browns to 23 points. It's not like the Browns offense is lighting the world on fire. The Browns, no disrespect to them, they're just not a great football team right now. And so that's why, I said the Facebook status being confused, or I feeling confused, because they won the game, but they easily could have lost it. And a win's a win, right? Any win you take, no matter how ugly, how pretty it is. But in some circumstances, some of the same stuff happened. But in this situation, Baltimore almost gave the game away, but they were strong enough. They were mentally strong enough. They believed enough to go out there and win it. And sure, did they have help in some circumstances? Sure, they had this bounce go their way or this thing happen, but they did it. They went out there, and despite everything, they did it. So plenty of things to clean up. This is a team that still confuses me. It's still confusing. But the defense in particular, the pass rush coming alive, was a very good sign. It was a good sign. And no, the Browns did not have a couple of their key offensive linemen. That probably contributed a little bit to the pressure. But give credit to the Ravens too. I mean, give credit to the Ravens. They were able to go out there and they were able to get Jacoby Brissett on the ground 5 times, key drive-changing plays, and ultimately the key play that many people are talking about right now is after the Justice Hill fumble. So the Ravens are trying to run the clock out. Justice Hill makes a couple of really great moves. It was going to be tackled for a loss of 3. The Browns force a fumble deep into Cleveland territory. The Browns then go and drive down the field, and they end up having to attempt a 56-yard field goal, which I tweeted it, the audacity to attempt a 50-plus yard field goal in Justin Tucker's house. But regardless, then there is a false start penalty called on the Browns, but you can see there's an angle where the snapper slightly lifts up the ball, which ends up, I think, triggering the offsides, or at least the encroachment penalties for the Ravens. So the penalty was called on an offensive. I think Michael Dunn, who was called on, he was like 2 linemen away from the snapper. So it's this whole debate right now. But regardless, the Ravens, that makes the Ravens push the Browns back 5 yards. So the Browns now attempt a 61-yard field goal. And the audacity to attempt a 60-plus yard field goal in Justin Tucker's house. And Malik Harrison, play of the game, blocks the field goal. And it's something about this Ravens team and blocking Browns field goals late in crunch time, as we know Brent Urban did during the 2014 season, I believe it was. So the Ravens, they have a knack for that against Cleveland. But huge play by Malik Harrison. The game then closes out from there. The Ravens are able to get the W, and it's big. It's a big one. Again, they moved to 4-3, 2-0 in their division, a big conference win, a big divisional win. So big credit to the whole Ravens team. Again, it wasn't a pretty win by any stretch of the imagination. They almost blew it in the end. You see the Browns trim the Ravens lead from 10-3. You're kind of thinking, oh no, here we go again. Is this what we're going to have to watch again? But credit to them. They know they had stuff go wrong, but they were able to stay strong, stay together as a team, and win the game. So now the key for them is how to build upon that. We will talk about that in the final segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about PrizePicks. And I do have plenty of fantasy players and plenty of fantasy leagues. I have fantasy stock everywhere. But if you do want a different twist on fantasy football, be sure to check out PrizePicks. And there's so many reasons to love PrizePicks. They have so many different formats and games. It's easy to play, and you can have a ton of current entries. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will go score more or less in their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people, so there's the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch, including NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and more. Entries can be made in 6 seconds or less. It's that easy. You know, safe and fast withdrawals. They're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app and go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On and sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. We're back here with our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostrowski, your host, still here with you talking Ravens football. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day here. Again, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow along in audio form. It is free, by the way, and be sure to make your second listen of the day Locked On Sports Today. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. But now we're going to talk about the Ravens and how they can build upon this game. The key for them, and one of the big goals, hey, let's get on a winning streak, right? Let's do this thing. If you're the Ravens, just saying, let us go on a winning streak right now and be able to pull it off. Because I think it's building that momentum. The Ravens, again, with those flip-flopping wins and losses, they're not able to build any momentum. It's good they're not able to build any bad momentum because they keep winning after losses, but losing after wins, it kind of kills that momentum a little bit, where if the Ravens were on a 3-game win streak right now, if they didn't lose to the Giants in week 6, you're talking about a football team that is 5-2 and has a ton of momentum on their side going into a week 8 matchup against a team in Tampa Bay that is reeling. Tampa Bay is reeling right now. So my take on the Tampa Bay game, it was a game that I thought the Ravens were going to lose entering the year. Now that we're here talking after this week 7 win and seeing what's happened in Tampa Bay and even taking into account what's happened with the Ravens, I think Baltimore wins it. We'll talk about why during the course of the rest of the week here. It's kind of a weird week here because it is a Thursday night game, so we'll be doing the preview episode on Thursday. We'll do the recap episode on Friday. We'll kind of flip-flop some things a little bit, but this is a game where the Ravens can seriously build momentum. And how do they do it? They have to go up against Tom Brady in a Tampa Bay team that just lost to the Carolina Panthers 21-3. And the Carolina Panthers just traded away Christian McCaffrey, who you can argue is their best or was their best player. They have a couple of really good players too over there, like DJ Moore, Brian Burns, etc. But the Carolina's clearly entering that rebuilding phase. Tampa Bay obviously still competing for a championship. Mike Evans dropped a huge 75-yard touchdown or potential 75-yard touchdown on one of the first plays of the game. So you are looking at a Tampa Bay team that has now lost two pretty bad games, one to the Steelers and one to the Panthers. The Ravens have to take advantage of that. They can't keep flip-flopping the whole year. That is not what pure Super Bowl contenders do. Now, we are in a situation now where too far into the year to say, oh, well, that's just the overreaction. It's just the early season. We're not in the early season anymore. We are almost halfway into the year. So trends are trends. Trends have been trends to me since week 6. I give it just over a month. So I give it past week 5, and then I say trends are trends. Some of the trends for the Ravens is they're still a little dicey closing out the games, but I do think that the momentum we talked about that the Ravens have, they have to make sure that they don't lose it this time around, because the Bengals are playing really great football right now. Those two teams are going to meet again really late in the season. That could be a huge, and that's why the Cleveland game was so important, because if the Ravens split with the Bengals 1-1, it comes down to division record. And the Ravens being 2-0 right now really helps them, especially because of the fact that Cincinnati lost to Pittsburgh in the opening game of the year on that Chris Boswell field goal. So you do have plenty of options if you're the Ravens here. You're traveling to Tampa Bay. It is a short week. You know, you're tired. You're banged up after a game like that against Cleveland, those tough physical divisional games. But I still think it's really important for him. Hopefully, potentially, Tyus Bowser plays in this one. That would be a huge boost to them. Gus Edwards with another week under his belt. That's going to be big as well. But you're going up against a talented Tampa team. Just because Tampa Bay is reeling right now does not mean they're not going to come into this game really motivated. I think they will. So you have to keep that in mind, because the Ravens, with all their losses, they've come out motivated, right? They say to themselves, we're not losing 2 straight. We're going to come out, we're going to win this game and make sure that we don't have that negative momentum, negative juju. So the Buccaneers, 2 bad losses, they're going to come out motivated. They have talent there, the receiver position, but they have been beat up with injuries, receiver-wise, secondary-wise. They have had players go down. Antoine Winfield left the game against Carolina with a concussion. So Tampa Bay is banged up, but so is every team. So are the Ravens. The Ravens are banged up too. So while this isn't necessarily an AFC conference game, it's a game against a good team that can beat you. And I know the Ravens' schedule right now isn't necessarily super daunting. I know Jonas Schaefer, the Baltimore Sun, put it out, and I'm gonna read it off here about where the Ravens are right now schedule-wise, because it is, compared to, I think, a lot of teams, pretty decently easy. Jonas ends up putting out a couple really good nuggets here, saying that the Ravens' remaining schedule has 7 games versus current 2-win teams. They're at Tampa Bay, who are 3-4, at New Orleans, who are 2-5. Then you have the bye week in week 10. Coming out of the bye, you have Carolina, 2-5, at Jacksonville, 2-5, Denver, 2-5, at Pittsburgh, 2-5, at Cleveland, you guessed it, 2-5, Atlanta, 3-4, Pittsburgh, 2-5, and Cincinnati, 4-3. This is an any given Sunday league, right? Any team can beat you. I think that we will see some resurgence from some of the teams on Baltimore's schedule, but they have a real shot here, a real shot to pull off multiple big win streaks. They might even only lose 1 or 2 more games this year, potentially, but there are keys to that. They could lose a lot of those games. They could lose plenty of those games, but there is the potential for them to go on a run here and make magic happen, because they have a talented team. They're getting guys back, right? Tyus Bowser should be back hopefully soon. David Ojabo should be back hopefully at some point. Marcus Williams, not a season-ending injury. It's these types of players that can make differences, but you have to be able to close games more effectively, because, again, Cleveland is another team that is also reeling. I mentioned they just aren't playing great football right now. And I think a better team probably beats Baltimore in that situation, if not for 1 or 2 extra things going on here or there. But this does give them, I think, that mental win. And sometimes those mental wins can be so underrated. So there are other things that this Ravens team can do to improve. I still think they need a wide receiver. I still think receivers not named Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay are doing enough. In fact, they are doing almost nothing. So I think you need to add another playmaker for Lamar Jackson that is not Deshaun Jackson. I think that is more of a, hey, practice squad, let's call the guy up and let's see. I think it should be, as I talked about, Deshaun Jackson and not Deshaun Jackson and over. So that's where I am on that. But we still have a ton to dive into throughout the rest of the week here. We'll continue wrapping up this Cleveland game. We'll dive into the Tampa game. And then before we know it, Tampa will be here and we will be talking on Thursday morning, previewing the game for Thursday night. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back in tomorrow, we're diving into more recaps of this Ravens Week 7 win against Cleveland and more. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you right back here tomorrow.